England head coach Eddie Jones, he's going to be sacked by the RFU today. Jones's future set to be announced today after it's rumoured that he sat down with the RFU bosses yesterday. So joining us now for more on this, the 2003 Rugby World Cup winner Ben Kay is on the line. Good morning, Ben.
Morning, Ben. How are you?
Morning, Laura. Morning, guys.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well. Probably a bit chillier than you, I imagine.
Yeah, probably a little bit chillier than us and maybe a little bit happier than Eddie is this morning. Let's talk about this because at the moment it's just reports. We haven't heard anything concrete at the moment. Which side are you on in this? What do you think it is that England need going forward? Is it Eddie Jones or is it someone else?
Look, probably people have been talking about, whether it's come to the end of the Eddie era for a while now. I've up until sort of before the autumn been thinking, well, it's a bit too late to change things before a World Cup. But I think the old adage, make friends on the way up because you might need them on the way down, probably applies here because there's not many people that are thinking that Eddie Jones should stay in his role. And obviously fans and media have a very different perspective and we tend to be a bit more emotional and also don't necessarily consider the wider aspects, and we just see how the players were playing. But I've said it before, I think Eddie has become the José Mourinho of rugby, and although he's very clever as a coach, coaches like that I think have a bit of a time span where they can make a difference, and then they start to upset people and they upset the team, and the team aren't performing. I've also said, would Eddie Jones have himself in the environment if he was picking an Eddie Jones? No, he wouldn't. So I'm probably on the side that it's probably time for him to go now.
Ben, I want to ask you, I make the comparison with the football side, for example. Gareth in England had no other word for it, a shocking Nations League, Nations League. However, at this moment in time, they're heading in the right direction, and I've got a big game against France to look forward to. You mentioned the autumn series. It wasn't good. Clearly wasn't good. Australia, New Zealand, a bigger part of South Africa, some really poor results. However, Eddie Jones's backers would say tournaments he does fine. Final 2003, final 2019, a great tournament with Japan. So I can actually see it from both sides.
Yeah, I do. I get that. And potentially, he could prove us all wrong if he keeps his job. He's got a good enough squad that what I would say is the environment just clearly isn't happy. And it's not about just the results, that look at the backroom staff that he's burned through. No other coach has come close to getting rid of coaches or coaches not being able to stay in that environment. Not just coaches. Physios. We've had 3 people leave since the autumn series or the beginning of the autumn series, just before it. I know that bar the players, there's no way we would have won the World Cup without the relationships we had with all the backroom staff and the physios that know what buttons they need to press for each individual player, the coaches that know what makes players tick, what gets the best out of them. And that's my big problem, that he's created an environment where it's not a game of chess. It's a team sport. You need to get the best out of people, and you need to create an environment where people are given the sort of psychological boost they need to perform at the top level. And I think that's the opposite now. I think people are suppressed by the fear a little bit of what it's like in that environment. I think he made a huge impact when he first came in, and a lot of Australians said he'll do that. And then a few years down the line, you'll be wondering. And when he first came in, he actually said to Lawrence Dallaglio on BT Sport in an interview, he said, I made a mistake with Australia in 2003. I stayed for too long. I'm best when I come in for 4 years, make a big difference. And then with hindsight, I should have got out then. And he's repeated that mistake now.
Ben, also, do you think it feels as if the team, as obviously some exciting young players now coming in, Freddie Stewart, Marcus Smith, just to name a few, it feels like maybe there's a change of the squad and he's having to deal with that as well as always, as England coach, is to get results as well?
Well, I mean, that goes back to, yes, I mean, he's always said it's about the World Cup. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think you need to be winning championships going into a World Cup to not only give yourself confidence that you're bulletproof, but also make the opposition, what they think of you and how strong you are. At the moment, people will think England are a bit of a soft touch and play within themselves. But the whole thing about players, he's brought in some brilliant young players, but he's also got such a high turnover of players that he's brought in for one game, jettisoned, and then gone. And that affects the whole camp. That affects, well, if he can do that to this kid that's come in, he'll do it to me. And I think he should be bringing the best out. One of the hardest jobs of an English head coach is as a selector, because you've got a bigger pool of players to choose from. And there's always a plus in the media saying, oh, why is he not picking this guy because he's in a rich vein of form? You have to, with England, create a little bit of a club environment where people know each other inside out. They know how to get the best out of each other. And if you're constantly changing and chopping, you never get that. And that's why I said it's not a game of chess. For me, it's become how clever he is and what little gems that he can find from elsewhere. But then if it doesn't work, he doesn't back up that plan. And that's been a big problem for England over the last couple of years.
Ben, let me ask you about Steve Borthwick, because his name has been thrown in the mix at the moment. You know him, obviously. You've spent time with him. What sort of a coach do you think he would be for England? Is he the right man?
Well, look, there's two. I think he was being primed as the person to take over Eddie Jones. So had England performed all right, I think what would have happened is England would have taken him to the World Cup. So he would have seen out this season with Leicester Tigers, but then he would have joined up with England almost as Eddie's assistant, so that you had that transition when the World Cup was over for Steve Borthwick to take over. He's a similar model. He's worked with Eddie Jones at the last World Cup, was very, very successful, was a huge, important part of that environment. And perhaps that could be one of the reasons why things have drifted since the last World Cup, because he set a lot of the training plans. He's a huge high work rate guy, probably the only coach that could sort of live with Eddie's demands. And then he obviously got the job at Leicester Tigers, was very successful very quickly with Leicester Tigers. I think he has a lot of Eddie's best qualities, but he doesn't have some of Eddie's negative qualities. So in that regard, I think he'll be a good person to take over. The other person that's being muted as a potential candidate is Scott Robertson from the Crusaders in New Zealand, who's also potentially being lined up for the All Blacks job after the World Cup. He's a very different personality. He's almost like a bit of a brand guy, he's will make everyone feel great in the environment, make it very exciting for the players. So slightly different personalities. Steve Borthwick, one of his major strengths is as a tracksuit on the field rather than dealing with the media. He doesn't speak well to the media at all, but that doesn't matter. But England, if they do employ Steve Borthwick, will just need to get someone else in or some other people in around him that can fulfill the roles that an England coach has to do that no other coach has to do in the domestic game, for example, so that Steve Borthwick can concentrate on the job that he's really, really good at.
talkSPORT Breakfast with Laura Woods, Monday to Wednesday mornings 6 till 10. On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.